Hi guys, and welcome back to Dice Down Gaming. Today we've got a really exciting interview. We've got Russ from Steamforge Games and Sherwin from Steamforge Games. We're going to be talking about the Frozen and Forgotten box. Most important question of every week: how are you, Sherwin? And how's your week
I
been?
mean, I like the way that's the most important question of every week. Like, how is
Always.
Sherwin doing? Brilliant. Yeah, I'm doing okay. I'm cold. It's the weather's changed.
Well,
Like,
you're
I'm
in like
starting
some
to.
sort of forest, which doesn't help.
Well, yeah, I know, right? But I've got a cold. I keep, blowing my nose and stuff. Like, possibly because of the background. But there we are. I wish I was somewhere tropical like you, obviously.
Yeah, you're
But
just
yeah,
hard committing to the old Umbre vibes, is what I think.
I mean, this is it. I'm literally in, downtown Cador. But no, yeah, it's going well. I'm desperately trying to get as many practice games in ahead of the World Masters as I can because I'm taking 4-4 Alliance, and that's a challenge. So,
Excellent. And all equally most important question of every week: Russ, how are you?
I'm fine. I mean, I'm no longer kept awake by wondering how Sherwin is, so I can relax.
That's good.
Yeah, I'm having a good week. I'm now entertaining myself with a mental image of a bunch of old Umbre warcasters singing Downtown. Now that apparently Umbre is downtown Cador, that's official. You heard it here. The Lawmaster has spoken.
I love the idea we could turn like Old Umbre the musical. That's clearly what we should be doing
Love
now.
that. That's excellent.
Werewolves of Umbre.
All right, awesome. So today we're here to talk about the new box. I think as of recording, which is the 12th of September, we're not released yet, are we, for the Frozen and Forgotten?
I mean, you are asking probably the two wrong people in the company to ask that question. I write the story. He makes pretty things. Like we
I
normally
don't
leave that part
believe
to
we're
somebody
I
else.
don't
released
think
yet.
they are. I think they're up for pre-order, yeah. But one of the things we'll probably touch on in this is like by the time something is coming to retail, it's probably been 9 months since Sherwin and I had our fingers on it.
Yeah, it's also worth pointing out, depending on when someone's listening to this, it might have been out months ago.
True, that's very true. As of recording, we're not got them in our hands yet.
Hmm.
So I think the opening question to set the scene is for you, Sherwin, being the law master in the room. What are the characters slash things in the box? Where do they come from? Give us a bit of background to it.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there. Which one are you most interested in first? Do you want me to start with the Deathless or the NIS?
Let's go with Deathless because I think they look cool.
Okay, cool. So the Deathless are. I'm going to work to the assumption you have you and the watchers have enough, the audience have enough of a sort of base understanding of the universe. So the Deathless are the original Orgoth, or the remnants of the original Orgoth invasion that happened way back in the day and really kicked off the development of Warjacks and a lot of the unification of the Iron Kingdoms and so forth. We see when the Orgoth were defeated and driven back across the sea, some of them remained. And they were just simply buried, in tombs and crypts and all sorts underneath the ground, where they've kind of lurked, waiting. And largely, it's been the case of being dormant, whether that's sleeping, whether that's prowling the depths and just murdering anything they come into contact with. But that's really where they're there with these huge hordes of treasure and all sorts. And you're an Iron Kingdoms player, so excuse me, an IKRPD player, you probably had a few quests and a few adventures in this sort of realm as well. So it won't be anything different to you, or anything new to you. But when the second invasion of the Yorgoth land, that's when not only do more of these creatures start to awake again and actually start to be more active, but also that's when you see some of the characters like Harusk, for example, make contact because they know they're there. And the way that the Yorgoth Warcasters work is that, or they're now Warcasters, they were Warlords the first time around, is that they were something where they're reincarnated. So Harusk is part of the original invasion, as well as obviously now the second one, obviously in a different body and so forth. But the point is that they actually have connections to these creatures. They will, they can make treaty with them and basically ask them to assist with what this invasion is. Now, what's really interesting is a lot of these Deathless don't actually find their goals aligning with the Sea Raiders and the Reaper Covenant. They're not. Orgoth society's changed quite a bit, and it's a bit like kind of you don't know how it was back in the day kind of thing. So there's some degree of animosity between them, but some of them will come forth and actually assist for the time being anyway, and that's where the Graveborn, as we have in this set, really come from.
That's awesome. Horus is really old. I didn't realize that. He must have bad knees. Achy boy.
Well, the way they work is they kind of get reincarnated. It's a fairly grim story, actually, where you basically just possess the bodies of people, of like your children and their grandchildren and so forth. It's not a happy place, sort of.
Very metal. Very metal.
Yeah.
How about
Everything about
the
the
Frozen?
So the NIST are, if anything, if one is the beginning of a new story, the final hunt is the end of one. So they are the NIST, and they pretty much are the only remaining NIST. There's not many of them at all left anymore. So obviously the NIST, as we know, are elves in our setting. They're one of the different sects of elves. They were largely preyed upon by Everblight and the Legion in terms of getting members to that cult effectively, and their their population was eroded down as time went on. And then when Nisor, their god, was rediscovered and taken to Ios, a lot of the remaining Nis took the pilgrimage to Ios to be near their god. That didn't work out too well, thanks to the efforts of a certain Gorshade. And as a result of this, a lot of the Nis surviving into the Iron Kingdoms just got annihilated in this moment that kind of created the Eldritch and wiped the Iosian sort of borders quite clear. So the Nis we have now are pretty much the only remaining ones left. They're banded together, and largely their mission is to hunt down any trace they have whatsoever of effectively Dragonspawn, of Everblight specifically, but that extends to Chimera and other things as well. And that's really what they are doing. They're effectively vigilantes is kind of the right term, I guess, but they're just on their final hunt, and they are effectively just executing anything they find, eliminating as much Dragonspawn as humanly possible. But at the same time, what they're also doing is obviously working alongside the Kingdom of Eternal Dusk, or the Empire of Eternal Dusk, because this is something where they can use that to resupply. So at the moment, their needs align, and for the moment, that's where they work together.
That's awesome. So the name The Final Hunt actually relates to largely why they're in the setting. It is the final hunt of that race.
This is their final hunt. Yeah.
Ah, fantastic. That was really insightful and really awesome. So thank you, Sherwin. Over to you, Russ. Now we know a bit about the boxes and about them. What did you have like an initial design brief for these sculpts?
Yeah, so these were two sets where, as is often the way, we got a collection of concept art through, some of which I can show you in a minute. I've got some of the got the Lanissa art up, and obviously it's a sort of tale of two halves, really, because the Final Hunt are intentionally drawing on very strong thematic elements that are already well established in miniatures, whether it's from Lanissa as was or the NIS models that appeared in Everblight. Whilst the Graveborn, that kind of deathless model hasn't really been seen on the battlefield. It's been alluded to. Obviously, there's IKRPG material, and obviously the general thematic sort of elements that make up the Orgoth in terms of the armor and the shape language and the designs of like the shapes of their weapons and so forth has all been established, as was, but it's never been sort of put together in this way. And then add on top of that, you've got that whole reanimated army quality. I mean, listening to Sherwin describe it, I'm getting big like Hela reanimates the army in Thor Ragnarok vibes, with the green fire, and then the whole army comes to life. It's like that kind of vibe. So yes, we had a set of really strong concept art for both sets of models to work from, and it was really interesting to see how one's drawing directly from its predecessor, and one is taking elements we've already seen and doing something really like original and new with them, and showing us something that we've not really ever had on the table before.
Absolutely. From a bit of an older school player, I remember making the NIS Hunters in War Machine Mark II. So it was really exciting to see them come back and a name that a few people will probably realise. So that's really awesome. So in terms of them introduced lore-wise, Sherwin, them sort of turning up in the story, are they advancing the story in any way by the Deathless guys reawakening and the NIS returning at all?
I mean, everything obviously progresses the timeline in some the timeline runs along. In terms of the actual main story arc, there's at this stage there's not too much impact to what's going on in terms of the goals of Subref in particular and the Sea Raiders, and thus the Reaper Covenant in Western Demoran. From a pure Orgoth perspective, there's not anything. I mean, the fact that Hruska's reached out to them to also kind of get these guys involved in the actual invasion and so on is interesting. Now, that's not necessarily part of the larger plan. Whether that comes to fruition, that's going to be a disruptive element or supporting, TBD on that front. I'm not going to spoil too much anything there, but we have this idea of that's how they fit in there. And obviously, again, as I said, they're not perfectly aligned, the Deathless and the Orgoth, or the living Orgoth. So it is something where it's entirely interesting to see this sort of rogue agent going around. One of the things that that we're also seeing, which is unintended, is the return and the awakening of the Deathless has other connotations. Something which is a little bit of a spoiler, but we haven't necessarily talked too much about yet, is there's more cephalics around than there used to be, and that's one of the reasons is because these Deathless exist in subterranean hives. The subterranean hives where the cephalics build their kingdoms effectively are now being overrun by Deathless, or hunted down by Deathless in there, who have awakened and are just attacking anything underground. So at this point, we're starting to see more elements outside of just traditional, just not overground, but it's more outside of the main story arc. This is bringing in more factions or having more impacts and larger repercussions as the world expands. The final hunt is a little bit more discreet. Obviously, the Legion was massively decimated by. I don't think we've massively decimated, but you are now. But was certainly decimated by Chimera. And it's worth pointing out, like, the final hunts aren't stupid. They know they're not powerful enough to take on the Chimera on their own, which is one of the reasons why they've aligned with the forces of the Dusk. But we'll see how that rolls out. Obviously, our story arc has got a long, long way to go yet in terms of what's happening in the main story. The impact of such a small group is not going to be significant at this stage. It's going to be more acute assassination or hunting, as you could see there. And whether that's going to be a notable figure or not, again, I'm saying nothing. But that's really where they find themselves.
That's so interesting. Thank you. And it's also quite interesting that they're operating in underground, and it coincides with the Cephalics release for this year as well. I'm not sure if that was intended or not, but that's some really cool synergy.
Well, I mean, there's some things there. I mean, Cephalics traditionally, the Cephalics hive traditionally don't work together at all. This is something where they're very isolated. And you have a character like Exelon Fexus, for example, who is very much this sense of not working with any of the other Exelons. And an Exelon is crucially, that's not the head of any hive, for want of it. It's the mastermind of any hive that you might find of Cephalics. They traditionally don't communicate, don't get on. The fact that we suddenly find ourselves with a host of different Exelons, including Nostilla, obviously, and Kaifos, is interesting that we have all of these notable figures. And whilst you can't obviously have them working together on the tabletop when you have, you'll have a Warcaster or whatever, the fact is that these are groups that are now more united than ever before, and that's one of the big knock-on effects from the Deathless.
I think that that there's a really cool, terrifying implication that the Cephalics have been like a proper monster under the bed bogeyman for such a long time, and now there's something that they're sufficiently afraid of that they're willing to allow themselves to be displaced.
Well, I mean, this is the big thing for the Cephalics. Actually, they're facing potentially an existential crisis. They've got Chimera, who's already destroyed one of the hives, and we know this much. And you also have now a Deathless as well. So that's a big driver for this.
Bad time to be a Cephalics person. But that's really interesting. And interested to know there's sort of like an inside friction between the Sea Raiders and the Deathless. That's must be really interesting to explore when you're writing. Excellent. Thank you, Sherwin. Russ, this one is back to you. Building on sort of the previous question, could we know sort of Nis were previously in the game? Did you draw on any previous artwork or older designs from them for the new box? So
that's an interesting question, and the answer is yes, but it's complicated because what we as the sculptors, if we're talking specifically about the sculptors, we won't draw on those older models, not least because none of those NIS miniatures exist digitally. So there is no like side-by-side reference that we can do. I mean, obviously we can look at pictures of them online and so forth, but before we start sculpting, there's been a whole art brief, and then there's been concept art created as a result of that. So that has drawn on the prior knowledge of the faction, and it's drawn on the prior miniature designs, and then that artwork has been looked at and reviewed and fed back. And you know, like Matt Wilson was still very involved in like the artwork process at this stage of these NIS. So yes, they do draw on that classic NIS DNA, but it all happens as like a sort of foundation for the sculpting process. If you want, I can share my screen and I can show you the concept art for Lanissa.
I would love that if that's possible.
So let me just do this.
So this is why Russ is the headliner and I'm supporter. Russ coming in.
I get to do
Russ
show
has
and
ideas.
tell. I was saying earlier, I can show, you know, different miniatures side by side. It's not as exciting when Sherwin just shows you the front page of 2 Word documents. But so this is an example of the artwork that we got through for the faction. So this is Lanissa, and as you can see, if I zoom in a little bit.
So is this out of interest? Is this done by a privateer press? Is that sent to you through them?
Yes. This was commissioned and coordinated by Matt. So we've got like the classic front and back views and showing how the hair is going to go versus not. So that's just your sort of anatomical breakdown. And then this very much was the core concept of the model with what we wanted to sort of achieve. And this is a very much a good example where the sort of dialogue of the design process has developed since we've become involved in it, and we've started doing miniatures in plastic, because things like the very thin sword design and the very, very long sweeping cloak were all like intentionally put into that artwork, because we knew that those were things that could be achieved really well in the HIPS plastic and would be more difficult to do in like the 3D resin. So these are miniatures designed to sort of try and take advantage and sort of stick a flag in the sand and say, you know, this is a literally materially different product, and we're doing something with it. So that's what the artwork looks like. And you can see a lot of the classic NIS like elements being drawn in, even like the color palette is in there to establish that NIS look. And the advantage of having the color artwork is, although a lot of the sculptors will ask for just the black and white line art version because it makes seeing all the shapes easier for designing the miniature, this is really, really useful when you're getting the miniature painted for like the box art and stuff, because it establishes what you're trying to achieve in terms of tone and palette. So that there is what we sort of worked from. So you can see where all those elements draw in. And with the Deathless, it was a bit more of a, you know, discovery process, but nonetheless, you could see all of the really strong elements. Where a great example on the Deathless is, I'm going to just stop my presenting. There we go. A great example on the Deathless is the shapes of their swords is based on a set of Orgoth like tower and monolith artwork from the I think it was done for the video game, but there was a whole series of like world art that was done, and it had all of these very, very specific shapes in, and that was used to develop the shapes of the weapons that the Deathless are armed with, to sort of get the sense that the Graveborn are of that time and of that period, in the way that, you know, Art Deco is found everywhere in a culture when it's popular, or what have you. You know, these things sort of influence every level of the culture. Like you could look at Celtic and you'll see like Celtic not working in like fabric design, jewelry, weapon design. It's the same kind of idea.
Thank you so much. And as a follow-up question, which you sort of alluded to, and I have no experience in even printing the model, let alone sculpting it. If you have a brief and you know it's going to be in resin as opposed to plastic, does that change your approach of how you will sculpt the model?
Yes, it does, and that's something that is an evolving process as we both get more experience and facility for designing in plastic, but also as we commit to making more models in plastic. And that means we know if a model's going to be plastic or resin, like further ahead of the process, we can intentionally do things that will enhance the process. In fact, about 45 minutes before we started this call, I was on a call with somebody reviewing some miniatures and looking at like things like if we put a step in an armor panel, that's where we can put the mold line, and you're not trying to glue two panels and try to hide a seam because it's hidden by the edge of one plate going over another. So like we can be very intentional about that. One of the other things, my other show and tell that I can show you actually is I've got the original sculpt of the Lanissa model that we had in from the sculptor, and I've got the engineered version that had all the changes made that we needed to make it the plastic model. So if you're happy to, I'll show my screen again.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Right, make sure I share the right thing.
Yeah, don't show all your anime books up with the model.
Oh no, having seen some of the stuff Russ is working on, you could get some monumental spoilers if you click.
Yeah, I have to be super careful.
Never know. I might have edited out a massive spoiler. Maybe.
There's still the classic story of the one time that I was doing a stream with Matt, was doing some painting, and I was meant to be sharing a PDF or something, and there was a Dropbox glitch, and I instead accidentally shared the root directory of the entire Steamforge product folder until that point. I deleted it really quickly.
Oh gosh!
Before anyone on the stream realised.
Yeah. So if you see a Menite riding a dinosaur, just shout.
There's always someone saying to do, isn't there? There'll be loads of comments now. Where's the dinosaurs? Damn it!
Oh, man. Right, okay, so this is the sculpt that came in from the wonderful and talented Irek, who is a frequent collaborator and contributor to War Machine. He's done Gravedigger work, he did everything in the Final Hunt, and numerous other models, too numerous to mention. So this is the sculpt as done, and obviously what he's done here is he's followed the concept art extremely closely, which obviously you would want him to do. And this was prior to our current process, wherein if there is changes on the concept art that I want, we will edit the art prior to sending it out. So this is a classic example of needing a de-riveting process, because there's a few rivets too many going on here. It's very accurate to the art, but it's not necessary on a model this size.
Can I ask at this point, would have this been printed, or this is purely a design?
This is purely a design. This, in this format, in this model, this will never be physical. So without going into the technical process, you can sort of see here, this model is actually made up out of a lot of individual pieces, and they add up to millions and millions and millions of polygons. I think there's like 60 million polygons in this model. And what that means is that no 3D printer in the world could handle the data. And the process of turning this into a print file can be quite arduous and time consuming. So it's not something we do until we need to prototype or test things. So at this point, it's based on, just like physically looking at the model and making professional judgments about what changes we need to make. So that's your model as it came in, and there's a few things straight away that we can identify. Like I talked about these rivets here, this hair across the forehead, which looks really good in the artwork. On again scaled down onto a scale miniature, that's going to be quite awkward to paint and be able to do a nice job on the face. So that's something that we were keeping an eye on. These leaves, this is step feathers, I mean to say, a great example of things on screens looking deceptive, like because they look really thick. These are like 0.8 of a millimeter in thickness, but like on a screen they read much thicker than they actually are. So you have to sort of learn to interpret what you're seeing into reality. So anyway, there's the model as was, and if I do this and zoom out a bit, we can see at first glance what appears to be the same miniature. But things that have happened here are, so you can see that we've reduced a bunch of rivets because they were just unnecessary. And then the main changes that have happened are very, very minor, but they have a significant impact on the process. Like this little set of straps here have just been rotated to face forward a little more. And all that's doing is meaning that when that arm sits in a mold, those rivets face directly into the mold, so they form perfectly and we don't get weird sort of stretching or distortion on them. And it's the little changes like that that matter and make the model functional. And, you know, like the eyelids around the eyes have been slightly exaggerated, which again, at scale, this size feels a bit shocking, but when you see the model, it's actually very, very delicate. It's just that this is the amount of fine adjustment that you have to make, because if you imagine that that's in a little steel mold, that's such a thin little sort of crease in the metal that you need it to be slightly exaggerated so that there's enough volume to sort of force the plastic into to create the impression. And what I can also do, if I just select this and I turn off our sculpt version, if we zoom in a little bit, these different colors represent our different parts. So this is the fully engineered piece. So this is exactly the model that would be on the sprue. So if I sort of do this, you can see that when we get this through, it has the engineering built in. So this enables us to see exactly how that miniature is going to be put together. And in fact, this is the file parts that I use with the graphics team to create the construction diagrams that we have in the thing. So these are also the first time where we can print out the model as it will be in plastic and see what those parts look like. So you can see exactly how this is designed around thinking about how the plastic's going to work. So that's going to be on a sprue like that. That's going to be where your mold line is. And so there's a very, very subtle rise to create the correct mold element. And those rivets form very nicely because they're pointing at the mold. And that detail's been designed around that. So you can see all of these little elements come together to create the plastic model. And yeah, we're very fortunate our factory team are really, really good at this. And we end up with a really, really slick looking miniature. And because of the lightness of the plastic, we can have these big flowing volumes and the miniature still works really well and doesn't feel overbalanced when you actually get it in your hand. The only significant thing I would point out, and I'm sure eagle-eyed viewers will have spotted it, is that in the original artwork, she had like an ice crystal in her hand. And we took that away. It wasn't for any technical reason. We just felt that all of her sort of action, all of her motion is kind of pointing forward, almost like she's like indicating for the war beasts and the rest of the hunt
issuing a
to go
command,
forward.
right?
Yeah. And having that crystal in her hand, it just felt like it sort of killed the momentum of her like posing in action. So we made the artistic choice that this was better for sort of conveying like the character and atmosphere that we wanted from the model. But yeah, so the process that we've gone through there is one of going backwards and forwards and reviewing things with the engineers and sort of identifying, you know, they might emphasize like retaining the detail on the hair, but then because of that there's a distortion on the face, and so we'll have this sort of dialogue and back and forth, and this is the end result ready to go onto the sprue.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you for all that detail. It was
insightful
and it interesting, and I'm really grateful. It was awesome. I have a couple of follow-up questions if you don't mind. You said that you removed the little bit of hair because that was actually for painting. Is that sometimes a decision you make that you might slightly modify a model for ease of painting? That's really interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think that it would be fair to say that Sherwin, Matt, Locks, myself, we've all painted hundreds, if not thousands, of War Machine miniatures over the years. And so we've formed strong opinions about what works and what doesn't in terms of there are decisions you can make that will make a miniature more or less pleasant to paint. And a lot of that is to do with giving shapes on a model room to breathe, giving the painter surface area where you can get a brush in, where you can get a wash in. And something like that forehead piece with the hair is a great example. If that's a flat area, you can use a contrast paint or a speed paint, and you can very easily put a highlight layer in. You don't have to have a super steady hand and a really fine brush. As soon as you break that up with that hair, it'll still take a contrast wash, okay, but now highlighting it has become so much more difficult. It's such a bigger challenge to ask someone to do. And so you're just putting a barrier between the very between like an entry level finish and someone who's like ready to take themselves to the next step. You are putting a barrier between them and being able to advance as a painter and enjoy painting that. So without compromising the character and intention of the design and the things that make it special, I'm not convinced that a lot of hair is essential to capturing the flavor of Lanissa on the table. So why not make that a more pleasurable experience to paint?
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was just super interesting, and I'm really grateful. Thank you. We're going to go back to you, Sherwin. This is a bit of a big one. So, and I'm not massively great on the law, to be honest. So it's a bit for me as well. But What is the sort of the general current state of affairs in, I think I'm right in saying the Western Kingdom is the right area, Imarin, I think it's the right name. What is the general current state of affairs? It's a loaded question, right? It's big. It's big.
I mean, it's huge. So, I mean, and effectively, the big catalyst of change has been the second Orgoth invasion. So the Orgoth have invaded. They're currently marauding through large sort of swathes of Kador. There's now occupied territory, which simply is currently has a whole bunch of Orgoth residing within it and building kind of foothold in the ancient mainland. And things are not good there for the inhabitants. Like, they aren't necessarily all just been slaughtered, but it's not great, in that terms. And that's spreading out, and that's now spreading out. Like in one of the interstitial stories you put out recently, we talked about how Ord, one of the other kingdoms below Kador, has like large chunks of that have now fallen. Their capital has been besieged and then since fallen. It's just pretty much the fortress cities left there now. Even parts of Signar have at this stage have now also got occupied territory going on. So yeah, that's the big catalyst of change. Obviously, we have Orgoth and Crix. It's a very unholy alliance that's now happened after the death of Blightergast. And Crix are up to something in relation with Orgoth, which I'm not going to spoil just yet because that's forthcoming. But there's something that we're going to start to learn about in the probably coming weeks, actually, about what's going on there. We have other armies. Obviously, we have the Empire of Eternal Dusk has now marched forth to join this alliance, because we currently have an alliance of Kador and Kador and Signar, and the Dusk, as well as the Brine Bloods. So the Southern Krills are kind of unified into that as well now, because everyone needs to repel the Orgoth. It's on this unifying factor of what's going on. And obviously, I've talked about before, we have Chimera and Cephalix and other agents are kind of floating around as well, doing their own thing. And that's before we start looking at some of the more further flung or at the moment lower or lesser seen factions. The Protectorate is still there, very much reduced from what they were before. They're still in their cities though, and they're somewhat removed from this main conflict. The Scorn Empire is still the Scorn Empire. It's across a desert and miles away from everybody else, but they're still consolidating power there. There's still a lot going on, but the Orgoth invasion is the big driver at the moment, and that's what we're going to see the main focus of the story arc going forward is, because that's really the disruptive element that everyone's trying to fight off.
Awesome. And as a Brucey bonus question, because I'm going to try it anyway, and I love Old Umbre. In terms of Old Umbre, it previously I know they're not Circle, but I used to play Circle. Are they there to try and restore balance of nature and industry, or are they there as a subsidiary of Kador to just fight for Kador, or is there a bit of both?
No, absolutely. They're so Old Umbre it's not really anything that their goals aren't really the same as what the old or what Circles was. Circle was very much about a balance of nature and civilization. And when I say balance, it's more like there should be no civilization.
Just like the Sith, where there's balance, right? They want
yeah. It's like Circle were kind of happy in a roundabout way when the Infernal War kicked off. They're like, okay, well, this fixes things. So
only a Wold deals in absolutes.
Exactly. So that's kind of a thing. But no, Circle are feeling pretty chill right now, because ultimately, off the back of that, civilization started to flourish again. Then the Orgoth turned up, and actually, they're kind of also doing something useful here, so they can kind of just sit back and take a break and see what's happening. But so Old Umbry, by comparison, it's the rural elements of Kador, and it's the machinations of the Old Witch. And obviously we know that's had some stuff in the past against the Infernals with the Grimkin and so on. This is effectively something the Old Witch has been working towards for a very, very long time, since as long as Kador has existed, and she's been building a power base in Old Umbry. And this is really that her hand has been forced by the return of the Orgoth, because this is something where that threatens everything that she's working towards. So this is really something where they're kind of patriots in the same way as you see in the more urban areas of Kador. They still want what's best for Kador. These are people who are very intensely proud of their homeland. The difference being, however, their way they go about it is not with warjacks and sort of a trained military in the sense of how the Winter Corps are and so forth. This is something very different, and they've stolen quite a bit of. Tech is the wrong word. Effectively, Wormwood has been captured by the Old Witch and is now basically imprisoned, and she's siphoning off its power in order to empower the Old Umbry forces. That's where you get the shapeshifters, and that's where some of the power going into some of the war beasts and so on is. Like the ferals, for example, they're the product of that, and that's where we start to see a real shift and a real change in terms of. There's conflict coming on that horizon actually between Old Umbry and Circle at some point, because obviously that's two groups that at some point Circle are going to realise, hey, where's Wormwood? And that's an interesting conversation, an interesting thing to happen. So definite build on that. So they're not really aligned in any way, shape or form with Circle. In fact, quite the opposite.
That is super, super interesting. And it's great to know that Wormwood is fueling Old Umbry. For all the pain he used to cause me playing in Mark II and trying to keep that damn tree alive, he can now fuel my new army in War Machine Mark IV, which is amazing.
I mean, I like the way that Wormwood continues to be a complex liability for Circle.
Yeah.
It's the best way to describe it.
He never changed. Excellent. Thank you so much, Sherwin. That was such a great answer.
Can I just, sorry, Aaron, can
please.
I just congratulate Sherwin for the phrase "Cricks are up to something," which is probably the most evergreen and also least shocking spoiler that you could possibly come up with.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's no other way of saying it. I mean, at any given time, if there is one constant, it is that at any given time, Cricks are up to something.
The evil undead arch nemesis lords may be doing something bad. Potentially.
I don't necessarily know they're evil. They just have a different perspective to everybody else.
It's a matter of perspective. You're correct.
There's an interesting, listening to what you were just saying, Sherwin. Sorry to go off on a little bit tangent, but isn't there an interesting sort of thematic parallel between Old Umbry sort of repurposing for their own ends the tools and trappings of Circle in the way that Cricks originally, the War Witch technology that they built their empire on, is a retooling and repurposing of old Orgoth technology and magical learning. It's very cool.
Exactly that. Yeah, I mean, obviously soul cages that Cricks used and so forth, they came from Orgoth. We have the Witch Coven of Gargast, which people may not have picked up on, the fact of obviously what's the name of the colossal that lurks in the Sea Raiders and so forth. There's lots of ties. Same with War Witches and all sorts. So
yeah, I totally agree, and I think it's a credit to your writing and the writing in general for War Machine, is that it's not really black and white. Cricks, you could say evil, but to their goals and their alignment, they're not evil. And I think it's written really well that you can see the perspectives of different people and why they're doing it. And it's not so much that you need to label Orgoth as evil or good. You can just understand their perspective. And I think that's a credit to your guys' writing. And you've done a great job on it.
Well, I mean, I will certainly throw, definitely at this point, we are standing I always feel I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. Like, there's people like the extremely talented, like Souls knows more about this world than most other people. Doug Seacat, Matt Getz, the list goes on and on. Privateer made an incredible world. The fact that we get to populate it and parts of it and enjoy it and tell stories within it is incredible. And whatever however that evolves going forward, it's always with credit to those guys. Like, a lot of what I'm talking about is something which is the product of their minds as much as ours. So
I think it'll be worth in some future time having a similar call to this, and we can relitigate the you can't call Orgoth out and out evil once the Reaper Covenant models come out.
Love that.
I mean, there's Russ throwing down some shade there.
It'll be
I'm not gonna argue,
interesting to get a fresh perspective on that.
Yeah, let's set this time next year, or whenever our schedules align. We can definitely do that, because that's a fun episode.
Absolutely, I would absolutely love that. And I also really love you. Recently on Wednesdays, had a few bits of Old Ombre lore. That's been fantastic. So thank you for that. Been reading that and really enjoying it. Russ, back to you for this one.
Sure.
And I'll probably ask Sherwin it as well. But out of the new box, do you have a favourite model in terms of design perspective, or one model that you think has nailed the brief more than others?
Yes, but for really bizarre and in some cases quite like nerdy technical reasons. My nerdy technical one is the Charnel Hound, and my weird rising intonation at the end there is like all of the names that I have for these things are from when they were sculpted, which was long before they necessarily had their final development pass. So I apologize if I used the wrong name for anything.
It's called a Dead Argus now.
Is it called the Dead Argus?
No, it's not. But that's funny. Yeah, no, it's a Charnel Hound still. You're good.
It's called an Argon.
Oh god, that is great.
So the Charnel Hound is a favorite because the engineering on it, it's a very complex model on the face of it, because it's covered in bandages, it's skeletal, it's got all of that ornate Orgoth armor. And when I saw the kit parts for it, it's like half the number of pieces that I anticipated it being. And the drafting and engineering solutions to make those parts work is just so clever. They did amazing work on the engineering for that, which is like I say, it's a very nerdy reason to have a favorite model, but I really like what they did with that kit. And although aesthetically I am much more drawn to a Nis kind of look than the Orgoth models, again, technically I think there's some really cool stuff going on with the Orgoth miniatures. You won't be able to have seen some of this because obviously the photos of the models that have been released, like you can't see them from every angle, but like one of the what did the unit end up being called? Are they still execrators, Sherwin? Or
yeah,
they are. Yeah, one of the execrators has like
they're called dead dudes now.
They're called dead dudes, right? One of the dead buff guys has got a hole punched through from like a spear blow that goes all the way through his eye socket, out the back of his head and out the back of the helmet, and there's daylight through it. And I'm really pleased at those little touches like that. And one of the things, again, I'm going to go with Barrowghoul. Is it still a Barrowghoul, the heavy war beast? Sweet. 3 for 3. I'm really happy how we handled the flames on that one. And in particular, one of the things that I really pushed for was, obviously, conceptually, it's a collection of bones and sinew and remains, sort of plasticine, Play-Doh molded into human form and then plated up in armor. And I was very, very specific that I wanted the armor to effectively be a cage around it in a way where there was negative space. There's air gaps between the spines of the armor and the bones within. I didn't want it all to just be molded as like a relief. I wanted it to feel like the concept, and all of that got absolutely nailed in the production, and we were able to do that. So for that reason, the Graveborn are my favorite models from a technical perspective, but the Nis will always have my heart as the models that I want to paint and play as a player.
I can appreciate it. I think in the Deathless stuff, there's that guy. He's like holding a shield and throwing a spear, I believe. Absolutely love the momentum and what you've captured in that model. I think fantastic. Sherwin, I think I'll ask you the same because that would be interesting. Do you have a favorite model or design from the new box?
Yeah, I mean, look, you've kind of hinted at it there, actually, interestingly. So I'm probably the opposite of Russ. Like, I think they're all obviously incredible. I think I really like, especially the way the NIST work in terms of they are a lovely foot in the past for a lot of old players who will remember the NIST and so on. I think there's a really strong visual to them. But, and this is the but, like I think it's the face armor, the Orgoth face armor, the style of the older Orgoth. I think that was I remember when Matt sort of talked to me about the fact that he wanted to bring that stuff back, and that's interesting, right? Because it's a challenge. Some of the older artwork, whilst it is got its absolute immediate charm when you see it, some of it can look a bit goofy if you're not careful. And I know Russ and I have had lots of conversations about the right way to get the screaming faces and so on on the armor in the past and make them not look kind of a bit comical. And I think that's a real challenge, and I think the team smashed it, simply put. And one of the things I actually like is, and the reason why I'm going to say Anathia is probably my favorite, is
I heard she was called Lady Skeletor these days.
Also, that's the strapline. So we have this. I think it's the fluidity of the model. That is effectively what could be seen as quite a static model. And we are talking about undead creatures. They're not necessarily known for their agility, but all of those models managed to convey this poise and this sense of movement to them. However, whether it's just this crushing step forward from the Baragul, whether it's the stoicism of the I've forgotten the name of the solo now. That's the part where I'm going to catch you out, but the
something champion, Revenant champion.
Revenant champion, and so just even the stoicism of just this model standing there with its feet and weapons ready to go, and the execrators and so on. I think there's a lot of fluidity to that. Which I really like, and they also managed to achieve it in a sinister way with the armor rather than feeling kind of goofy, which I think is really, really important. So that's why I'm a big fan of those guys.
Can I just jump on the end of that and say one of the decisions that I think was, and I can't claim credit for it, it was a decision taken at like quite early in the conversation, is traditionally, as you say, Sherwin, like an undead model would be expected to feel very static, and elf models we associate with speed and agility, and yet the deliberate decision was taken to make the final hunt miniatures feel very static and stoic, and like they are choosing to make, like they know that this is an ending, but they're choosing to make it an ending of their making, whereas the Orgoth miniatures, they have that movement and that crushing sort of inevitability of because for them this is, like you said earlier, Sherwin, it's their beginning, like this is their rebirth, and so they're all about moving forward and pushing their way back into the world, and like that, having the two sets like sort of contrast each other in sort of like that theme, but also be like a reversal of what you'd expect from those sorts of miniature types, I think was like a nice decision that sort of really helps give them that unique character on the table.
Well, thank you both. That was an amazing answer. I'd just like to credit you guys. I think it's very easy, as you said, to make undead guys with skulls look kind of goofy, and I think you've really nailed it. They're menacing, and also credit that they're animated in the sense they have some like dynamicism to do. They look like they're moving, but not faster than they should, but they're not static, and I think that's fantastic. Also credit to Old Ombre in general. I've just got my core box and put it together yesterday. Absolutely love them. I think the progress you guys have made in terms of detail on your miniatures, just beautiful. Like the Liegeman Wardens, every model is gorgeous. Absolutely love them. So just general, well done on Old Ombre. They're fantastic. We're pretty much coming to the end of our time together. I've gone through all my questions, and I'm massively grateful for your time. A little Brucey bonus, and this is completely random, really. And I ask most people who come on the channel, if you could level up a Warlock or Warcaster. I would love to see Ragemonger 2 turn into an actual big shark. Completely random. I'd love it. If you could complete freedom, you could level up any Warlock you want, and it can turn into what you want. What would you like to level up? I've had some great answers today. I would interested to see what you guys think.
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah.
I can go first, Russ. If you Russ, you're sort of either bouncing on your heels or trying.
I've got a dog. I'm keeping a dog pacified. So yeah, I'm frantically stroking a dog to stop him from getting overexcited. But
right, let me do.
Yeah, you do yours.
I'll do mine first. I'm going Carver 3. Like here Karchev. Imagine if that's Carver, but it's like a body of like a conquest or a mastodon. So it's literally Carver's head on top of one of those, and it's just like colossal.
Yes, love that.
That's why I'm seeing like he's just going bigger and bigger and bigger. Like there's this thing stomping down, and it's just Carver.
I love that answer.
So for my part, I mean, I've given the answer in the past that like, quite aside from leveling up a character, if I could take another stab at somebody, I'd love to do Terminus as a plastic model, because oh my goodness, could you do something awesome? But like in terms of, so this is where it gets awkward. I have two answers, and for reasons I can't talk about, I'm not going to say what either of them are, but I've already fulfilled my ambitions.
Nice. Well,
that said, I would love to take another stab at Bradicus Thor, because he was the first Warcaster I ever sculpted for Privateer Press. And he's another model that I think could be off the charts good in plastic.
Nice. Well, I appreciate both your answers. Like, I didn't tell you I was going to ask you that before. It's a bonus I ask everyone. Funny story. First time I made Lich-Lord Terminus in War Machine Mark II, when it dried, people thought I'd primed it white for the amount of super glue that I used to get that model together. An amazing model, but old and heavy in metal, and those wings are not easy to get on. So I would also love to see Mr. Boggs, epic Mr. Boggs, is a pig warlock. I'm all behind that.
Yeah,
but,
pig warlock when is a very good question.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's nothing to say there can't be.
Yes, this is what we like to hear.
There's nothing to say there can't be a pig warlock. I don't think. I think when Kifgard arrive, you guys are going to have competition for Mr. Boggs, though. Like in terms of most popular pig.
Yeah, he's a great.
There's a real flavour in some of the new pigs. So
yeah, and Kifgard, what we've seen so far, look amazing as well. But I will wrap it up there, because I could ask you questions all day, and it's only so much time I'm allowed. But a massive thank you to you, Sherwin. A massive thank you to you, Russ. Your answers have been massively interesting and insightful, and I'm hugely grateful. A massive thank you for all the work you do at Steamforged Games and making a game that I love to play and lots of people love to play. And a massive thank you for coming on my channel. Anything you guys want to do as a closing for on sculpting or lore, and then we'll wrap it up.
I mean, everyone keep enjoying it. Basically, like it's been the response from the community has been humbling in terms of us, taking over. I have conversations with people where they tell me they like stories and they like the world and they want to just ask questions and stuff at shows. I had a long conversation with some of the guys when I was at Nova a couple of weeks back about the narrative, and they were running there where they had Barnabas turn up and all sorts, like an amazing 120mm base Barnabas come out of the ground and attack people was cool. There's loads of stuff, like there's so much passion in this world, and it's awesome. It's very humbling to be able to work with it. So thank you everybody for enjoying it, and just for in case I don't get the opportunity to say thank you for having us on the show, Aaron.
Definitely my pleasure.
I'd echo everything Sherwin said. I mean, we were fans first, long before we did this as a way of keeping a roof over our heads, and it really is like just so much fun to work on. So yeah, and as Sherwin says, thanks for having us on the show, and no doubt we'll all sit down and answer and chat even more in a week or so at the Welsh.
Absolutely. So for anyone who's got this far in the video, and I'm sure you have, because it's been just amazingly interesting, thank you very much. And until the next one, I'll see you soon.